Yeah, so just carrying on, voluntary drug tests. It sounds like a nice, relaxed kind of thing. Do you want to volunteer to do a piss test? Yeah, okay, I'll volunteer. Doesn't work like that at all. My first interaction with VDTs was when I became a gym orderly in Belmarsh. You had to give voluntary drug tests to keep your job, and it was about once a week, once every 10 days. So the voluntary aspect of it was bollocks. It wasn't true. I mean, I guess technically they could say, yes, you are volunteering to do this, but if you don't do it, we're going to sack you from your job, and probably nick you for refusal. I used to, again, those voluntary drug tests were really difficult for me, because what they used to do on those was, after lunchtime bang up, they'd start unlocking people who were going to work or visits or whatever else, and that was how it went. So I'd hear doors being unlocked, and maybe my door would unlock and there'd be 2 screws there with a pot. There you go, piss into that. And the thing is, I didn't mention this in the mandatory drug test one, but it's the same with voluntaries. They stand there and watch you. As soon as you're called for a drugs test, you're under suspicion, so you get strip searched in MDTs. You may find, from memory, I think I used to sometimes get a pat down for voluntaries, sometimes strip searched. But it was awful for me, because they used to come and just crack my door open. There's nowhere to have any sort of sense of privacy to go to the toilet. My prison door would be there to my right, my toilet would be there to my left, and standing right there in the doorway, 2 screws. I managed to get it done. I would have to sit there desperate for a piss over lunchtime, and hopefully that would be enough. It usually was, but it's hard work. You want to go to the toilet and you're just sitting there. So what I started doing at lunchtime in Belmarsh back then, we used to get one of those little Calypso little plastic pots of like shitty apple juice, or sometimes orange, and I used to then take that, drink it, and I would keep the container, and when I needed to go to the toilet during the lunchtime bang up, I would just fill that up, and I would put it on either on my sink, which was just next to my toilet, or I'd put it on the toilet rim, where hopefully wherever I put it, I was just living in hope that they didn't spot it, or didn't spot me doing the transfer. And that was fine. I used to just put my own pee in, and they would dip test it, and it would be fine. There was one day where they didn't turn up, so unlock happened as normal. I went to work and I forgot I'd left the little pot with my wee in it on my sink. I came back from work that afternoon and I was called straight into the bubble, which is the wing office, and they told me, we're placing you on report. I said, what for? They said, you're nicked for they said there was some a container of urine in your cell. I said, yeah. And they said, a female officer went into your cell to do LBBs this afternoon, locks, bars and bolts. Locks, bars and bolts? I think it's called that, LBBs anyway. They do checks on your door lock, the bars at the back of your cell, over the window, and other bits and bobs, maybe check your water's running and all this stuff. Anyway, so I got my nicking sheet and it said endangering the health and safety of prison staff. this was a problem because, I mean, apparently this officer, she picked up the container, and apparently, even though it didn't have a lid on it, she shook it to see what was in it. Covered herself in my piss. I was just like, what the fuck? Anyway, so I went for my nicking. I was taken to the SEG in Belmarsh, and I was put before a governor. I was asked how I pleaded. I pleaded guilty, and you get a piece of paper that you can write your mitigation on. So I did, and I explained, look, this is my situation. I can't just piss on command. I can't. And even though the prison service does not recognise paresis as a thing, it is a thing. And that's my defence. I couldn't possibly have known that an officer would go in there, pick it up and shake it and cover herself in piss. And I probably, being the fucking smart ass that I can be at times, I would have maybe mentioned that, by the way, urine is sterile. It comes out of your bladder sterile. There is no health and safety risk. But I probably didn't say that. I might have thought it, but I wasn't. I was a novice, and I just used to almost say yes sir, no sir, not quite that. I wasn't a screwboy or anything, but I took it on the chin. They found me guilty because I pleaded guilty, and I did okay out of it in the end. I think I got a week's loss of earnings and a week's loss of canteen, which was no major thing. That was my first ever nicking in prison, and for the rest of the 8.5 years that I served on that sentence, I never got another nicking. And that was dealt with and done and dusted. I didn't lose my job, which was for me it's 6 o'clock in the morning, give me a break. That was the most important thing. I loved my job. I've always loved being a gym orderly because it's a busman's holiday for me. So yeah, that was my first encounter with voluntaries. Then when I went to Swaleside, I was on the enhanced side of E-Wing. Everyone on the enhanced side of E-Wing had to do voluntary drug tests. They were actually, I didn't say much to start with because I was just kind of feeling my way, but in the end, after I'd settled and they got to know that I was a half decent inmate, they used to give me a strip search, and then they would just leave me in the voluntary drug testing suite with my pot and shut the door and just leave me alone. And 2 minutes later, I'm there. I've got my wee on the side. I'm ready to go. So they come in, do the dip test, and I'm clear. I did get threatened with a nicking during those 4 years that I was doing that. And the nicking was for, we had a new supervising officer on the wing, and he decided to nick me for diluted sample. And he had no authority to do that. He had no, so what if my wee was not bright orange? He came to see me, he said, look, you're getting nicked, you're obviously diluting your sample, trying to affect the result. I said, mate, I work in the gym, I drink a lot of water because I train a lot. You'll be hearing from my solicitor about it because this is bullshit. And I was polite and decent, but I said, I'm not doing anything, and I'll give you 100 samples and you won't find a positive one. So you'll be hearing from my solicitor about the nicking that you're about to issue. And he ran backwards. He said, no, look, we don't need to get in, go this route. But I said, well, you're leaving me no option. You're making me guilty of something I'm not guilty of. It's a voluntary test for a start. Those rules don't apply to voluntary tests, but you're making them. So anyway, he wound his neck in. I didn't get a nicking, and I carried on as normal. There's been other instances of me having certain jobs that require voluntary tests. So they're not voluntary, they are mandatory voluntary, but hey ho, I never failed one. And that's it for drug tests. Have a good day.